This story, the one of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, has always been one that touches my heart. I remember in college learning that the shortest verse of the Bible lies in this text. While the NRSV has correctly translated verse 35 as Jesus began to weep, the Greek is only two words, Jesus and the verb for cry. It's an emotional moment captured in just two words. This isn't the only time Jesus shows the full extent of his emotional range, but it is the most poignant. Even though Jesus knew ahead of time that Lazarus was dead, the moment overwhelms him. He's surrounded by those who have gathered to mourn this man, and he feels the tension we all feel at funerals. It's that realization that life on earth is temporary and that our bodies are so fragile. It's the sadness that Lazarus is gone, well and truly gone. It's been more than 3 days. That's how long a soul was supposed to hang around a body waiting to return in Jewish belief. Jesus knows that he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead, and still the grief overwhelms him. Well, it has always been Jesus' grief that causes me to sit up and listen to this story. It is his anger that surprises me every time. The NRSV says in both verse 33 and 38 that Jesus was greatly disturbed. When I read this, I imagine him reacting to the scene in the same way I do as seeing a bad car accident. There's minor concern for those involved and a bit of surprise, but because it's strangers, I don't feel an emotional connection. Jesus is more than just disturbed. He is angry. The word used here literally means to snort like a horse. Imagine the amount of anger needed to look like a snorting horse. If we use our own colloquialism, we might say that Jesus was spitting fire. But what causes Jesus to become so angry? In both verses 33 and 38, Jesus responds with anger to the deep mourning of the people around him. Commentators have spilled a lot of ink on trying to determine the exact cause of Jesus' anger. Was he mad at the Israelite mourners who had come from Jerusalem? Did he think their cries of grief to be fake? Were they calling out insults to him, accusing him of being able to save Lazarus had he been present? Was he mad at the religious leaders who had driven him out of his homeland to begin with, making his presence at the death of Lazarus impossible? Or was Jesus mad at death? Was he struck in this moment of grief for his friend at the depths to which the world had fallen and the power death had taken over human life? I don't have an answer for you this morning, but I do have a lot of questions. The main one of which is, are you dead? I don't mean, are you dead like Lazarus was dead? I mean, are you so wrapped up in your own life and circumstances that you have cut yourself off from the world and how you fit into it? Have you become so self-centered that the only time you feel emotion is when it is related to yourself? Whatever Jesus may have been sad over or been angry at, we know it wasn't about himself. Jesus saw how Lazarus' life fit into the bigger picture of salvation, and it was within that context that Jesus felt grief and anger. This is not to say that when you feel things about yourself, that's a bad thing. However, as Christians, we are called to live for more than just ourselves. We are called to share the love of God with the world. This requires us to feel something for more than just ourselves. Sometimes we feel sad and sometimes we feel angry. What we can't do is love the world from a distance, cutting off our feelings. Jesus felt for the world. What do you feel for the world? Are you experiencing this virus from your home, removed from the consequences? Do you see the hurting families separated and suffering? Do you feel their pain? Are you concerned for the rising rates of child abuse and death of children at the hands of the caregivers in this quarantine? Do you feel the fear of these children forced into dangerous situations? What do you feel for the world? Are you dead? Jesus felt sad and angry, and then he did something. He felt the grief of his friends and raged against the power of death in human life, and then, when all hope seemed lost to those around him, Jesus performed the miracle they didn't even dare to hope for. He called Lazarus from the grave. Jesus used the power within him to defy grief and death. What are you doing about what you feel for the world? What miracle can you perform amid a pandemic? Don't say you can't do anything. A mom in Abingdon, Illinois started a movement to put hearts in house windows for kids to find when they go on walks with their families. In fact, my neighbors just put hearts on their windows today. This small gesture has spread through Facebook to the entire world in just 1 week. One of my fellow pastors in Southern Illinois started selling t-shirts to support the local businesses in his town. It's taken off and making a difference in his community. All the while, these world changers sit in their homes and do what they can. What are you doing about what you feel for the world? Jesus raised the dead. Are you dead? While the emotions of Jesus and the raising of Lazarus sure do make a good story, the true center of the story lies in Jesus' interaction with Martha. Here we find the reason Jesus feels and the reason Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. When Martha finds out Jesus is coming, she runs to meet him outside the village. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. What sounds like a complaint from Martha follows typical Israelite pattern. It's an acknowledgement of her frustration, followed by an acknowledgement of her faith in Jesus. She doesn't expect Jesus to raise Lazarus from the dead, but she reminds him that despite her questioning of his actions, she still trusts him. Your brother will rise again, Jesus responds. I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day, Martha tells him. She knows the truth of the resurrection. But Jesus corrects her. I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Martha's response is a confession of faith. Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. This interaction is the whole point of the story. Jesus doesn't raise Lazarus from the dead just to prove that he can. Jesus has already raised others from the dead. Jesus raises Lazarus right before his own death and resurrection, as a reminder that that's what's about to happen to us. Jesus dies and raises again for us. He takes on our sin and death and brings us to life through resurrection. Lazarus is the first of us. So the question remains, are you dead? Not only have you cut yourself off from the world, but do you truly believe in Jesus as the resurrection and the life? Have you chosen to remain in your life of sin and death? The only way to life is through Jesus and the gift offered to each of us. It's there for the taking. We don't have to ask for it. We don't have to work for it. We don't have to be perfect to receive it. It's already ours. And all we have to do is say yes. If you need help saying yes this morning and don't know the words to use Martha's. Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. For the first time in the history of me being a pastor, I have given a sermon that deserves an altar call. And for the first time, I am unable to invite you to the altar to pray. Instead, I ask you to seek your heart this morning. Ask yourself this question. Am I dead? If you have never declared your belief in Jesus before, repeat the words of Martha now. No one must be present for the words to be heard by God. I don't need to lay my hands on you to make it real. God is moving you into a new place today through Jesus' words. Lean into the Spirit, declare your faith, and accept the gift that is already yours. For those of you who have long believed, the question still applies this morning. Am I dead? If you have cut yourself off from the feeling of the pain of the world, let it in. Feel what's wrong with the world, and then do something about it. Through the power of the Holy Spirit, you can change the world. Don't let a virus stop you. Do something. Are you dead? I'm going to leave you with this illustration of resurrection from C.S. Lewis's The Silver Chair, as a reminder that there is always hope. Then Aslan stopped, and the children looked into the stream, and there on the golden gravel of the bed of the stream lay King Caspian, dead, with water flowing over him like liquid glass. His long white beard swayed in the water like waterweed. And all three stood and wept. Even the lion wept, great lion tears, each tear more precious than the earth would be if it was a single solid diamond. And Jill noticed that Eustace looked neither like a child crying nor like a boy crying and wanting to hide it, but like a grown-up crying. At least that is the nearest she could get to it. But really, as she said, people don't seem to have any particular ages on that mountain. Son of Adam, said Aslan, go into that thicket and pluck the thorn that you will find there and bring it to me. Eustace obeyed. The thorn was 1 foot long and sharp as a rapier. Drive it into my paw, son of Adam, said Aslan, holding up his right forepaw and spreading out the great pads toward Eustace. Must I? Said Eustace. Yes, said Aslan. Then Eustace set his teeth and drove the thorn into the lion's pad, and there came out a great drop of blood, redder than all the redness that you have ever seen or imagined, and it splashed into the stream over the dead body of the king. At the same moment the doleful music stopped, and the dead king began to be changed. His white beard turned to gray, and from gray to yellow, and got shorter and vanished altogether. And his sunken cheeks grew round and fresh, and the wrinkles were smoothed, and his eyes opened, and his eyes and lips both laughed, and suddenly he leaped up and stood before them, a very young man or a boy. But Jill couldn't say which because of people having no particular ages in Aslan's country. Even in this world, of course, it is the stupidest children who are most childish, and the stupidest grown-ups who are most grown-up. And he rushed to Aslan, and flung his arms as far as they would go round the huge neck. And he gave Aslan the strong kisses of a king, and Aslan gave him the wild kisses of a lion. And at last Caspian turned to the others. He gave a great laugh of astonished joy.